Now let's build this frost fragment. We'll be designing a lot of this in 2D, so we'll switch over to the front view by hitting the middle mouse button. And let's make a disk. And this disk we'll put on the negative z-axis. That way it's facing forward and backward. Then hitting C to make it editable. Then click the point tool here. Select this bottom point. And then hit E to go to transformation mode or move mode. And then we're going to toggle on soft selection. And that way you can see here, this area here will be affected as we move this point. So we'll just drag this down to make this bottom section pointed. And that way this stays nice and circular. And we want to cut a hole in this middle here. So with the point tool still selected, we'll click this middle one and hit MS. And that will go to the bevel mode. And then we can drag this point out and it'll make a nice perfect circle. And if yours isn't circular, make sure this is set to fixed distance. If it's set to proportional, it's going to follow the contour of the shape itself. So we want to be in fixed distance. Now hit an E again to go back to the move tool. I'm going to grab this bottom point, turn off soft selection, and just pull it down a little bit more, just so this section here goes more to a point, instead of having it kind of curve in. So now we have a basic shape going. Now let's switch over to the polygon tool and hit O for rectangular selection mode, and grab all these and just delete those. And then it looks like there's a single n-gon here, so I'll hit E for just normal selection or move mode. Select this and delete. So now we just have half of this built. And to mirror this, we'll just go up here to this button and go to mirror or symmetry, and then drag the disk inside. And that way it'll mirror across the ZY plane. And we want this fragment to be able to split in half. So let's select this disk and hit KK to go to line cut mode and make sure edges is selected. And now we should be able to single click here, move all the way down here, and then hold shift to snap it in place. And we'll just cut this edge. And you can see we can keep going, but hitting escape will finish that tool. Now to split this edge up here, let's just select it and hit MS for the bevel tool. And then click and drag, and you can bevel this edge just to cut this nice area in here. So switching back to polygon mode, I'll hit 9 to go to paint selection. And we'll paint these polygons. And hold shift to continue selecting over here. And we won't select these little polygons that we made here. Now back in perspective mode, I'll hit D to go to extrude. And then just click and drag to extrude these pieces out. Now to add some depth to this, let's hit I to go to inset mode or extrude inner, and click and drag to the left, and we'll inset all of this. And now switching back to perspective mode, if we just take this arrow here and pull it forward, now we have this nice extrusion that comes in just a little bit, just to give it some detail there. And this grid's getting in the way, so I'll go to filter, work plane, and filter world axis, just to clean that up. Now with the disk still selected, we'll go to edge mode and double click this outer edge. And if that doesn't work, just hit E to go back to the move tool. That way you can select edges better. So double clicking this outer edge should select the whole outer ring or the edge loop. Now we'll hold Control or Command and just drag this back, and that will duplicate those edges. So now I get some thickness here. And eventually we're going to be putting something in here later in this course, so we need something to support it. So back in the polygon tool, let's grab all these main faces here, hit I again to extrude inner, and drag over, and you'll see these are all connected, so let's turn off preserve groups. That way all these are individual pieces. And now if we want to move these in a little bit, we can right click and go to normal move or hit MZ. And that will move each of these faces along their normal axis. which is basically straight out from where they're pointing. You can see they all go right towards the center. So we just want to pull these out a little bit, and then hit D for extrude again. And then we'll extrude these. And then right click, go to normal scale, and that will scale each of these along their normals. And that should just shrink them down. So now we have a bit of this sawtooth shape here, which we'll be able to put something in later. And because we want the left and right pieces to be separated, I think we need to add a little edge here that will separate these two, because otherwise it just looks like they're all one piece. So I'll select the disk, go to the edge mode, hit KL to go to edge loop tool. And I'll just put one here, and then down at the bottom, put another one. And now we can just grab this edge, and this edge should be the one right in the middle. And then grab this blue arrow and just pull it back until this edge is sharp. Hitting NA again, we can see what it looks like. Now I have a good division here. And I think this point looks a little silly being out. I think if this was manufactured, these would be straight across. So I'll select the disk, go to point mode, and let's switch back to the front view. And we just want to grab these 2 points. Actually, let's grab all 3. Go to the scale tool by hitting T. And then in modeling axis, in the Y direction, we'll turn this all the way up. That way this tool here is lined up with the highest point. So if we scale, these bottom 2 should rise up. And then if we hold Shift, we can make sure it goes to exactly 0. That way these are perfectly aligned. Now that looks more correct down on the bottom. And just for continuity, let's add an edge in this section here, even though these 2 pieces will probably be connected when we're working in it. So I'll select the disk, go to edge mode, hit KL to insert an edge loop. And this time we're going to hold Shift just to make sure it snaps right in the middle here. And with that selected, we'll hit MS to go to Bevel Tool. And it looks like it wasn't selected, so we'll just double click this to select the whole loop. And then we'll drag out just to make a little edge there. And we do want one more edge inside of here, so we could add another edge loop, or we can just take the subdivision and turn it up by 1. That adds this edge in here. So now we can hit E to go back to the move tool, select this front edge, and just drag it back until we break that Phong angle. And we could do the same with this one in here. And might as well do this one. And I know we didn't do that at the top and the bottom, but we might as well. So now you can see the widget here is totally off kilter because I think it's maybe looking at the normals of this edge. So hitting W will switch between world and object mode. So world mode, Y is always going to be straight up. Let's check all these angles to make sure these are all sharp. And we'll do the same on the bottom. So now we have a neat looking shape here. And we can keep going, adding just a little bit more details kind of at random. So we'll select this disk again. Go to polygon mode, hit 9 to paint on these polygons. And we'll select these and these. Hit I to inset or extrude inner. And we can keep preserve groups unchecked. That way we could get all these extra panels. But we will have to fix this up here because we're extruding in this little area. And obviously that's overlapping. So let's switch back to point mode. And we'll just have to move these points here. And sometimes when polygons are overlapping, even if you see a point, you might not be able to select it, like this one here. So you can hit 0 to go to rectangular selection and just select right over it. If you select too much, you might get points on the back side, so try to just go small. Or you could hit NG to see through it, and that way you know if there's anything behind it. Now we can just scoot this back over. That way we fix all that overlap. And it looks good on the bottom here, but I think we'll have to maybe combine these or move this down a little bit. So I'll select this other point. Let's move it out. And this one, just move it down a little bit. Actually, for these two, I think it would make sense if these were combined. So I'll hit ME to go to the polygon pen tool. And I'll drag this point on top of the other just to combine those. And then select that single point. And I'll just move it down until this section here and this section here are pretty much the same width all the way down. And that looks fine there. So now back on the polygon tool, it looks like our selections are saved. So now we should be able to safely just drag this forward until those falling angles snap, just to get those hard edges. And we do have a little funkiness here where this edge kind of goes up and meets it here. I don't know, we'll just call that little section a bit of flare and call it good. So now if we turn off symmetry, we can see what half of the piece looks like. And obviously the back is empty. So let's turn back on symmetry, but instead of going across the ZY plane, let's go across the XY plane. That way it extrudes, or it mirrors back. And you can see it's intersecting itself. So with symmetry selected, we'll hit L, and that changes the axis mode. Or the axis or pivot mode. Now we should be able to drag the symmetry object until it's back on this back edge of the shape, which then mirrors things back. And actually, I think we want to be mirroring it right along here, not along here, because we don't want double of these little edges, or these teeth. Let's turn off the symmetry, and let's just cut straight along here. So I'll switch to the side mode, hit KK to go to line cut mode. Make sure the disk is selected. We'll turn off this axis mode, and make sure the edge mode is selected. And now I'll just single click here, hold shift, single click again. And if you want, you should be able to drag this around to make the cut wherever you want it. And holding shift will snap it. So if I want to move it back a little bit, I can scoot this. It looks like that committed it, so I'll just undo that and just do it again. And that looks good. I'll hit escape to commit that. Go to polygon tool, hit 0, drag up here, and make sure none of these little pieces got selected. Now you can see what happened. It deleted some of it, but not all. And that's probably because back in the line cut tool, visible only was selected. So we need to turn this off, undo that cut, make sure visible only is off, and then do one more cut. Now selecting these polygons again, we should be able to delete everything. That looks good. We can turn back on symmetry, select it, enable axis mode, and just move this back in until these are fused. And to increase the distance in which these will fuse, you can change this tolerance of the weld to say 0.1. And now you can see as we move this, it kind of snaps into place once we get pretty close. But you do need to be careful. If this is too high, you can start collapsing literally everything. So it's best to keep this pretty low. And ideally, your symmetry is exactly where you need it. So if anything, you would turn off weld points, put it as close as you can get it, and you can zoom in really far too to make sure it's super close. And then click weld, and 0.01 centimeters probably will do the trick since we've got it already really close. So now we're just back to one set of teeth and we're mirroring it or symmetrizing it so both sides have the enclosure. Now let's see how many polygons we have. Selecting the disk and then going to mode project info. We can see we have 144 polygons, so this is Really good. This is super low poly. If we want to smooth out some of these hard edges, we can add a bevel in the deformers up here and hold shift to make it a child. And I'll hit NB to see where these edges are being drawn. And here we can set use angle, so it'll only affect things over 40 degrees. You can see as we change this, at 0 it affects everything, and at 180 it affects nothing. So if you only want those hardest edges affected, you can kind of dial this in. Looks like in the 30s is where most things get affected. You can also turn on limit, and that will make sure things don't overlap like this piece here. And then you can turn down the offset just to sharpen that edge. And if you're getting weird issues like here, where there's this point that just gets created, or here, you can try changing the metering from default to uniform. And sometimes that fixes these issues. There's also radial, which looks like it's the same, and patch, which is also quite similar. Looks like default is the worst one, in our situation at least, and uniform looks like it does the trick. You do need to be careful though when using the bevel tool, because you'll see this edge out here is now super soft. I guess it was before, but if we change our Phong angle by clicking the tag up here, you can see we can sharpen those edges, and then turning on the bevel actually looks like that solved that issue. So now a lot of these flat faces are a lot sharper, but then we still get those nice glints right along this edge. And turning up this bevel, you'll be able to see it a little bit more. Also turning up the subdivisions, you can kind of see the effect of that, where you get these nice highlights around these edges. But if you turn up the subdivisions too much, you start getting a lot of extra polygons that you probably don't need. You can see how many it adds just by cranking this up. So keeping it down to 0 or 1 is ideal, at least for AR programs like Spark. Now, in order to see how many polygons we have in total, I'll just middle click this and go connect objects, and then go back to mode, project info, and we have 760. So this is still really small. So I'm not afraid to use one subdivision on this just to get it smoother. That way all those edges are looking nice and crisp, but they still have a little bit of specular hits. Now to prepare this for texturing, I'll middle click this, connect all these objects, and I'll just turn this off by holding Alt or Option and clicking these. So these turn red. That will hide it for the renderer and for the editor. And let's rename this disk to Frost's Fragment. And the UVs are going to be really bad, so let's go to BP UV Edit. And you can see it kind of has the shape, but it's not taking into account the back and the front faces, and all these middle pieces look like they're not even there, so we need to basically start over. So under Projection, let's just do Frontal, just to get a base level here. And because the front and the back are the same, we can select this edge. I'm going to turn off Enable Axis here. And just double clicking this edge should select the whole ring, or the whole edge loop. And now let's UV unwrap that. Now it looks like there's a couple polygons that got created that are basically infinitely small, or they're insided. So it automatically selected those. I'll hit delete, and that'll clear those out. And then it looks like we just have to fill in a couple of polygons. So I'll hit ME to go to the polygon pen tool, and then control drag this edge to duplicate it. And that closes that hole. And this, I'm just going to manually close that. Same with this one. And this probably happened when we were doing the beveling, because the bevel sometimes adds some bad geometry. Now the other piece is in here somewhere. So let's see what's going on. We did hit delete, so it probably deleted this inside polygon. So hitting ME to go back to the polygon pen tool, we'll go to point mode, and I'm just gonna fuse these together. And I'll check the four corners because I'm sure it happened all the way around. So maybe that did the trick. Going back to polygon mode, I'll select all just to be safe. And let's do frontal projection again. It's still not liking these polygons, so I'm going to go to point mode, select all, right click and go to optimize and check this little gear here. And we'll make sure the tolerance is set super low. 0.001 should be good. That will fuse any points that are basically on top of each other, and that sometimes will clean up issues. And I did see a little thing happen here. Let me undo and do that again just so we can see. So watch this section here. It looks like something was happening. And yeah, you saw that shift a little bit. So let's try this one last time. Go to edge mode, select this edge to cut it, and then hit UV unwrap. And it looks like it unwrapped, but they're overlapping, so we'll go to UV packing, geometric, and hit apply. And that just separates these two out. And now having this one, or these two big UV islands, there's probably a lot of stretching going on. So in view, we can go to distortion and turn that on. And that'll show us the blue areas are stretched out and the red areas are compressed. So we need to go and chop this up a little bit more. So on this inner edge, which is this edge here, we can double click that and then unwrap that one. And that breaks these two apart and loosens them up a bit. And this section is pretty rough here, so I'm just gonna grab this whole edge here. And if you have trouble selecting the edge, you can try using this tool up here, path selection. So you click where you want to start, and then just kind of draw with your mouse. And it will try its best to draw a straight path wherever you go. And if it doesn't want to finish your path, you can just click it and then carry on from there. So that'll chop off this section. And we'll do the same over here. Maybe it'd be best to just cut along some of these long edges too. And if you need more space to see things, hit Control Tab, or I think Command Tab on Mac. Then that just maximizes your window. Now once you have things broken up fairly well, you can go to the Relax tab, and then click Apply down here. And keeping Auto Realign checked is nice, because then it'll rearrange everything. And you can click it a few times just to keep relaxing it. And it looks like that did a decent job. Although, looks like there's some overlapping here, which is not good. Yeah, I think the relaxing did a bunch of damage. And if you're just sick of UV unwrapping, or you just want to take the easy mode and do it a little less efficiently, but a lot quicker, you can go to Automatic UV, have Packed turn on, and just click Apply. And now everything is totally unwrapped. Nothing should be overlapping. But as you can see, there's a lot of extra pieces that Probably didn't need to be cut off, but that's just the best it can do. And this piece is going to be pretty small in our spark scene, so I don't really care too much if the UVs are all messed up. And we're just going to do a quick texturing in Substance Painter. So I'll go to File, Export, FBX, and then save this out. Now in Substance Painter, we'll drag in the frost fragment. And let's actually try Auto Unwrap and see if it does a better job at grabbing some UVs automatically. Otherwise, all the other defaults should be good. And it looks like it got it all unwrapped with 2 pieces, which is way better than Cinema 4D did. It's kind of hard to tell if these are really squished or not, but let's find out. So first of all, as usual, we need to go to Texture Set Settings and bake all the maps. And we'll just do 1024 for this one. We don't have any IDs. And then just hit Bake Selected Textures. Now that looks good, and we can use these smart materials now that we have all these baked out. So scrolling down, select Smart Materials. And we're just going to grab a metal for starters. Let's try a copper red bleach because it looks like it has some nice detail in it already. And you can see the edges here are worn down because it's taken into account all those mesh maps. If we open this up and look under edge damages, if you select the mask down here, it should show that it's using all these maps to calculate all those edges and where to put all those scratches. So it's a great start. I think instead of this reddish copper color though, we can go to the base material and change this base color to maybe like a bluish tint, since it is a frost fragment. And now let's add some white snow to the top surface of this. So we can close this folder by clicking the folder icon, and we'll delete this empty layer. And let's actually use the snow material that we used for the snow surface earlier. So in the search, we can type snow, and that Icelandic snow that we had earlier is there. So we'll drag this on top of this layer, not inside, but on top. Now we get that snowy surface, which looks nice. It looks like there's some weird render issues going on. Hopefully there's no overlapping polygons, which is kind of what it looks like, but we'll just keep moving forward and see if this works. Now for the snow, we don't want to cover in the whole thing, so let's right click and add a black mask. Now for this one, we can use a smart mask. So over here under smart masks, you have all these nice presets. And we want something that accumulates on the top, obviously. So something like this one, Moss from Top, could work. It looks like that might be the best option. So we'll drag this and drop it directly on this mask. And automatically you can see this top surface is snowy, and then as it goes down, it gets less, but it's still hitting that under layer. And it looks like this is actually using more of just a gradient from the top to bottom. So let's delete this and make our own. So let's right click, add a generator, and click the generator button here, and we'll add a light. What it does is it calculates what direction each face is facing. So if we adjust these values until we can see what we're doing here. So this vertical angle, I think we want straight down. It's going to be, I think, 270. And then the horizontal angle doesn't matter since we're pointed straight down. So the horizontal angle is just rotating kind of the same information. So now with the highlight level turned all the way up, light attenuation down, and now we can control with this highlight glossiness how much everything's covered up. So if you turn it all the way, we get basically nothing. And looking at the top, you can see how that accumulates. So I think going about halfway, we don't want these side pieces to be covered. So we want to be just above that. Just so we have the snow up here and it's clean on the bottom. And to give the snow a little bit of thickness, if we turn on this height, it looks like it adds a little edge there. So it's like the snow is kind of built up and hanging off those edges. And again, I don't know why things are so jittery. Let's actually check our FBX and see why this is happening. Back in Cinema, drag the FBX back in. And it looks like if we unhide this, there is 2 of these. So let's delete that and re-export this. I think that was the issue. So I'm going to drag in the new FBX. And it looks like it actually kept these layers intact, which is nice. Obviously, this is all messed up, but I think we just need to rebake our mesh maps. And now we're back in business, and now we don't have that flickering. So now that we have all this set up, I think we need to manually paint in a little bit more where these edges stop, because it looks a little artificial having this edge be totally perfect. So back in our layers, in the Iceland snow, we can right-click this mask and add a paint layer. And now we can paint on top of what this generator already did. So now you can see we can paint in addition to what has already been done here. So I'm going to grab a brush, make sure it's kind of a rougher, snowy one. Again, I like these dirt brushes quite a bit. Now I'll switch to 3D only view, or you can hit F2. And I'm just going to go around and roughen up this top edge and just add some more snow. And what's cool about this is you can see that the height channel also comes through. So as I'm painting, you can see that bumpiness is propagated. And if it gets dark on the back side of your object, hold Shift and right-click and drag, and you can rotate that light. And if you're getting some of these hard edges, you can make sure the projection is set to triplanar. And that should smooth out any of that because it projects from all these 3 axes, or all 6 of these planes. Now you can see this whole edge here has no UV seams. You can have some fun with this if you go into the particles. There's just a handful of physics-driven brushes. So for the snow, it looks like maybe leaks could be a cool effect. Just make sure your paint is selected. You can see it throws these particles all around, and then they kind of fall down. So it's almost like they're little icicles. And snow doesn't necessarily accumulate like this unless it is icicles and it's melting a little bit. So feel free to use that or keep it just manual. So once you're happy, go to File, Export Textures, make sure Spark Air is set it to 1024 just to be safe, and then choose the file path. And then hit Export. And it looks like that came out all right. Now we did unwrap this in Substance Painter, so we need to make sure we also export the mesh. So go to File again, Export Mesh. We don't want to triangulate. And we do want it without displacement or tessellation. And we should be good. To test it, you can hop over to Cinema 4D, drag in the new FBX, and also drag in just the color should be enough to test it with, and then drop the color on top. And it looks like all that worked out. We have proper UVs and the textures came through. So now we just need to put all this together in Spark.